Stepping back at the right moment isn't distance, it's emotional intelligence. Space lets her breathe, feel, and choose with clarity. Confidence isn't in constant presence, but in grounded self-control. When energy doesn't chase, it becomes magnetic. She gravitates toward what respects her rhythm, not rushes it. That's the real reason she's drawn in. Stepping back is not withdrawal. It's emotional intelligence in motion. It's the quiet understanding that closeness does not require constant proximity, and love does not need to be proven through pressure. When you step back, you aren't disappearing. You're creating space for clarity to emerge, for emotions to settle, and for the connection to breathe. Most people confuse space with abandonment, but the truth is far more nuanced. Space is not the enemy of love. Suffocation is. When you step back with intention, you aren't pulling away out of fear. You're moving with awareness. You're acknowledging that someone else's emotional landscape might be different from yours. And instead of forcing your pace, you honor theirs. Emotional intelligence is the ability to read the moment, to understand when presence comforts and when presence overwhelms. Stepping back at the right time reflects inner strength, not insecurity. It shows that you aren't controlled by impulse or ego. You don't need to chase to feel worthy, nor do you need to engulf someone to feel connected. You know that if something is real, giving it room won't weaken it. It will strengthen it. The truly emotionally intelligent recognize that tension isn't always a sign of rejection. Sometimes it's simply a signal that the heart needs quiet. And instead of reacting with confrontation or panic, they respond with calm. This calm is what allows the relationship to reset, to realign, and to naturally find its equilibrium again. When you step back, you give the other person the chance to feel their emotions without interference. You give them the dignity of their own process. You let them hear their own inner voice instead of drowning it in your noise. So many connections fail not because of lack of love, but because one person tries to force understanding before the other is ready to speak. Stepping back respects timing. It says, I trust the process, I trust you, I trust myself. And trust is far more powerful than pressure. This kind of emotional intelligence is magnetic. It communicates stability without a single word. It shows a level of maturity that very few embody, an understanding that closeness is meaningful only when it's chosen, not demanded. When you step back with grace, you allow desire to regenerate. You allow appreciation to return. You allow the connection to become intentional again. You become someone who doesn't just react. You respond. You don't escalate. You observe. You don't smother. You understand. Stepping back is not an exit. It is a breath. It is a reset. It is the pause that prevents emotional overwhelm from turning into emotional distance. When done with awareness, stepping back becomes the most powerful form of presence, because it shows you are grounded enough to hold the connection, mature enough to withstand discomfort, and wise enough to know that sometimes silence speaks more truth than words ever could. Space becomes the oxygen a relationship needs to breathe, not a threat to closeness. When two people come together, the instinct is often to stay wrapped in each other's energy, constantly talking, constantly reassuring, constantly proving that the bond is intact. But real connection doesn't grow through pressure. It grows through balance. Just like the body needs air between each breath, relationships need emotional room between moments of closeness. Space prevents suffocation. It allows individuality to stay alive. It keeps the connection from becoming something that drains rather than nourishes. Most people misunderstand space because they equate it with distance or detachment. They assume that if someone needs a moment alone, something must be wrong, or the bond must be weakening. But emotional maturity recognizes that space is not a departure, it is a form of care. It's the understanding that no one can function as their best self when constantly overwhelmed by another person's presence or expectations. Space allows the nervous system to relax, the heart to settle, and the mind to reset. When someone takes a step back to breathe, it isn't abandonment, it's protection of the connection. When you give space, you are saying, I trust you enough to allow you your own rhythm. That trust becomes the foundation of emotional safety. It shows that you're not trying to control the flow of the relationship or micromanage the other person's feelings. You're letting things unfold naturally. And in that natural unfolding, closeness becomes deeper, richer, and more authentic. Space makes room for longing to return. It allows appreciation to grow. The heart gravitates back to what it doesn't feel pressured by. Relationships fail not because people drift, but because they're never allowed the room to drift back. When everything becomes intense, immediate, and constant, the connection loses its softness. It becomes mechanical rather than emotional. Space breaks that cycle. It invites both people to step into themselves, to reconnect with their own thoughts and identities, so they can return to the relationship from a place of fullness rather than depletion. Giving space is also a sign of self-awareness. It means you understand that your presence should add value, not become a weight. It means you know that love thrives when both people can breathe freely, when they are allowed to feel, think, reflect, and return by choice. A relationship without space becomes a cage. A relationship with space becomes a sanctuary. And here's the beauty of it. Space doesn't diminish closeness. It intensifies it. When emotions have room to move, they deepen. When silence is allowed, understanding grows. When distance is honored, connection becomes intentional rather than habitual. Space becomes the quiet reminder that love doesn't need constant proof. It just needs room to breathe, evolve, and reflect the best in both people. Confidence is revealed through self-control, not constant presence. Anyone can show up every minute, demand attention, or overwhelm someone with non-stop communication. That's not confidence, that's fear wearing a mask. True confidence is the quiet strength that doesn't need to insert itself into every moment to feel secure. It's the ability to regulate emotions, to respond rather than react, and to understand that your value doesn't increase through pressure, it increases through composure. Self-control is what separates emotional maturity from insecurity. It shows that you trust yourself, you trust the connection, and you trust that nothing real requires force. Constant presence often comes from anxiety, the fear of being forgotten, replaced, or misunderstood. But confidence doesn't operate through fear. Confidence understands timing. It understands energy. It knows that closeness is not built through suffocation, but through emotional steadiness. When you practice self-control, you communicate that your world is not dictated by someone else's temporary emotions or silence. You stay grounded. You remain balanced. You don't lose your center just because there is a pause, a moment of quiet, or a need for space. Self-control speaks louder than any performance of availability. It shows that you are not controlled by impulse, ego, or insecurity. You don't chase validation because you already possess internal assurance. You know your presence has weight, and you don't throw it around recklessly. You choose your moments with intention. You choose your words with clarity. You choose your energy with wisdom. That's real confidence. It's measured, it's calm, it's rooted. When someone brings constant presence, it often comes with hidden expectations. Notice me, reassure me, respond to me, validate me. But when someone brings self-control, it comes with respect. Take your time, feel what you feel. I don't need to hover to matter. That kind of emotional discipline is magnetic. It creates safety instead of pressure. It invites closeness instead of resistance. People naturally gravitate toward the energy that doesn't demand. They feel drawn to the stability, the certainty, the quiet strength that self-control radiates. Confidence also means you don't make everything about you. If someone needs space, you don't interpret it as rejection. You don't spiral into assumptions or act from panic. You hold your ground. You give breathing room without resentment. You understand that both people stay healthier when they're allowed to exist as individuals within the connection. That isn't distance. That's emotional alignment. And here's what makes self-control so powerful. It makes the connection feel safe, not chaotic. It signals maturity. It signals strength. It signals emotional depth. Constant presence might seem like effort, but effort without regulation becomes noise, not love. Self-control, on the other hand, becomes the anchor. It shows that you don't need to dominate the space to be valued in the space. You don't need to be seen every second to remain significant. Confidence rooted in self-control leaves room for desire, curiosity, and appreciation to grow. It turns the connection into something intentional, not reactive. And the stability it brings creates the very closeness constant presence can never achieve. The woman's heart opens more to the energy that doesn't chase but understands timing. There is something undeniably powerful about an energy that moves with intention instead of desperation. Chasing may feel flattering at first, but over time it becomes overwhelming. It signals fear, not confidence. What truly draws a woman in is presence without pressure, interest without insistence, desire without demand. It's the kind of energy that knows when to come forward and when to pause, when to hold space and when to give it. Timing is everything in emotional connection, and the energy that respects timing becomes irresistible. When someone chases, they crowd her emotional space. They rush her process, her feelings, her natural pace. They try to pull her into a rhythm that doesn't belong to her. But when the energy is grounded, patient, and intuitive, she feels safe rather than suffocated. She senses that she is being understood, not managed. She feels valued, not cornered. The heart opens in environments where it doesn't feel pressured to rush, explain, or perform. It opens where it feels seen and allowed to breathe. Timing is a reflection of emotional intelligence. It means paying attention to her signals, not just her words, but her tone, her silence, her energy. It means recognizing when she's overwhelmed and stepping back without taking it personally. It means noticing when she's receptive and showing up with presence, not hesitation. This natural rhythm builds trust because it shows that you're not moving from fear. You're moving from awareness. You don't need to chase because you recognize that what's meant to align will align naturally. A woman's heart responds to stability. When the energy isn't frantic or needy, she relaxes. She feels safe to be herself. She feels free to express without worrying that her emotions will trigger insecurity or overreaction. She knows she can take a moment to breathe without causing panic. That freedom is rare and it is deeply attractive. It creates emotional safety, the foundation of real connection. Understanding timing also means understanding that love is not a race. Real connection is not built in forced moments. It unfolds in honest ones. When the energy is patient, she feels valued for who she is, not for how quickly she responds or how consistently she reassures. When the energy doesn't chase, it communicates, I see you, I respect your pace, I trust the flow. That trust is what softens her defenses and opens her heart. Chasing often comes from wanting to control the outcome, but grounded energy understands that control kills connection. What opens the heart is alignment, not pursuit. Timing is not about waiting endlessly. It's about moving with emotional awareness. It's about knowing when to be still and when to step forward. When that balance is present, the connection becomes natural, organic, and deeply felt. Because a woman doesn't open to pressure, she opens to presence. She doesn't open to chaos. She opens to calm. She doesn't open to chasing. She opens to timing that honors her emotional truth. Respecting emotional rhythms creates deeper trust than endless reassurance ever could. Reassurance may soothe for a moment, but it can never replace the depth that comes from feeling genuinely understood. Emotional rhythms are real. Everyone has moments when they open, moments when they retreat, moments when they need stillness, and moments when they crave connection. When someone respects this natural flow instead of trying to control it, trust grows effortlessly. It shows emotional maturity. It shows awareness. It shows that the connection is not being forced into one person's preferred pace, but allowed to breathe in its own authentic timing. Endless reassurance often comes from fear. It's an attempt to fix emotions that aren't even broken, to hurry someone back into closeness before they're emotionally ready. But when emotions are rushed, they shut down. When feelings are pressured, they harden. Real trust can't exist where someone feels monitored, corrected, or hurried through what they're experiencing. But when the emotional rhythm is honored, the heart feels safe. Safety is what builds trust, not repetition of comforting words, not constant checking in, not constant reminders. Trust grows when someone feels free to move through their emotions without guilt or resistance. Respecting emotional rhythm means understanding that people don't always communicate at the same speed. It means recognizing that silence is not rejection, it's processing. It means knowing that temporary distance is not abandonment, it's recalibration. It means seeing emotional waves as natural, not threatening. When those rhythms are respected, the connection becomes deeper because it's rooted in acceptance rather than anxiety. The heart opens when it feels allowed to be, allowed to feel, allowed to pause, allowed to need space, allowed to return in its own time. Reassurance has its place, but even the softest words fall flat if they come from a place of fear. True trust is created not by what is said, but by how someone behaves during emotional shifts. When they stay grounded instead of reactive, patient instead of panicked, understanding instead of demanding, it communicates something far more powerful than reassurance. It communicates emotional safety. It tells the other person, your feelings don't scare me. Your pauses don't threaten me. Your silence doesn't make me insecure. I'm here and I trust your process. And that is what allows the deeper layers of the heart to reveal themselves. A person who respects emotional rhythms becomes someone you feel safe being honest with, someone you can express yourself to without fear of being misunderstood or rushed, someone whose steadiness becomes a calming presence rather than an emotional burden. That presence builds a level of trust that words alone can never create. Endless reassurance might calm the surface, but respecting emotional timing heals the depths. It creates a bond rooted in understanding, not obligation. It shows that the connection is real, not dependent on constant emotional management. And when someone feels that kind of freedom to move, to feel, to breathe, they trust more deeply, love more openly, and commit more naturally. Pulling back at the right moment amplifies value, certainty, and mystery. Most people believe that constant closeness is what strengthens connection, but the truth is far more subtle. There's a rhythm to attraction, an emotional tide that ebbs and flows, and knowing when to step back is what keeps the connection alive and charged. Pulling back is not manipulation, it is awareness. It is reading the emotional temperature and realizing that energy needs room to settle, to reset, and to find its way back with clarity. When someone pulls back with intention, their value naturally rises. Why? Because value is never created through oversupply. When your presence is constant, your energy becomes predictable, expected, and sometimes overlooked. But when you step back at the right moment, you remind the other person that your presence is not a given. It is a choice. That choice adds weight to your energy. It becomes something that is felt, not just seen. Space makes people notice what they weren't paying attention to. It highlights the absence so the presence can be appreciated again. Certainty also grows through this balance. Constant presence often creates emotional dependency, not stability. It can blur boundaries, confuse intentions, and overload the connection with too much intensity. But when you pull back with emotional steadiness, you communicate confidence. You show that you don't need constant reassurance to feel secure. You show that you trust the connection enough to give it space. That calm self-assurance creates predictability, not the kind that bores the heart, but the kind that grounds it. You become someone whose energy is consistent but not overwhelming, available but not suffocating. This balance is what builds real certainty. And then there is mystery, the part of human connection that keeps the heart curious and engaged. Mystery is not about hiding. It's about not giving everything away at once. It's about allowing a bit of the unknown to breathe through the dynamic. When you pull back at the right time, you allow curiosity to rise. You give the other person room to wonder, to reflect, to miss your presence. Mystery is born in the space you leave, not in the effort you display. It's the quiet intrigue that whispers rather than shouts, and those whispers become far more compelling than constant noise. Pulling back also gives the relationship emotional ventilation. It lets heightened emotions settle and prevents the connection from becoming too heavy too quickly. When the energy becomes intense, pulling back protects the bond from burnout. It allows both people to recalibrate emotionally. It creates a pause that renews desire. Desire cannot survive in clutter. It thrives in space, in moments of absence, in the gentle pull of longing. This is why pulling back at the right moment is powerful. It restores balance. It preserves individuality within the connection. It keeps the emotional dynamic alive instead of stagnant. It communicates strength, security, and intention. And in the quiet distance you create, the other person feels more drawn, more curious, and more appreciative. Because sometimes the most powerful way to move closer is to step back just enough for the heart to reach forward on its own. Space allows her to feel, reflect, and choose, not react. In a world where everything moves fast, emotions often get pushed into corners they're not ready to occupy. When someone is overwhelmed, pressured, or constantly met with expectations, their responses stop being genuine. They shift from authenticity to survival. They react instead of feeling. They speak to ease tension rather than express truth. Space breaks that cycle. It gives her the room to step out of emotional noise and return to her inner clarity. It allows her to sit with her feelings long enough to understand them, not rush through them. When she's given space, she's no longer required to manage both her emotions and someone else's anxiety at the same time. She doesn't have to reassure, explain, or fix. Her heart finally gets the quiet needed to process what's happening within her. She can evaluate what she truly feels, not what she feels pressured to feel. And this matters because real connection is built on choice, not obligation, not fear, not guilt. Choice comes from clarity, and clarity can only come from space. Reflection is one of the most powerful emotional tools a person has, but it can't happen in chaos. It requires breath. It requires silence. It requires room to gather thoughts without being smothered by questions, demands, or constant presence. When she has space, she can reflect on what she wants, what she needs, and what she's afraid of. She can assess whether she's reacting to old wounds, current triggers, or genuine concerns. Without space, everything gets tangled and she becomes a mirror of the moment rather than the truth of her heart. Space also gives her emotional freedom. People often underestimate how valuable it is for a woman to know that she can step back without causing panic. When she sees that someone doesn't crumble, chase, or fall apart when she needs a moment, she feels emotionally safe. That safety is what allows her to return with openness rather than tension. Space tells her she's allowed to move at her own pace, and that freedom removes pressure, softens defenses, and deepens trust. When she's not forced to react, she's able to choose. And choice is the foundation of meaningful connection. Choosing to stay, choosing to return, choosing to communicate, choosing to open up. When those choices are made freely, not because someone demanded emotional immediacy, the bond becomes intentional and strong. People value what they choose more than what they feel pushed into. Space activates that internal decision-making in her. It lets her ask herself, what do I really want? What feels right? What aligns with my truth? Without space, emotions become tangled and reactions take over. With space, emotions breathe and decisions are made from alignment, not pressure. Space doesn't weaken connection. Space purifies it. It removes noise, fear, and emotional clutter. It allows her to come back, not because she should, but because she genuinely wants to. And that is always where the strongest, most authentic love begins. Real strength lies in knowing when connection grows through silence, not dialogue. Many people believe that communication is only measured in words, that love is proven through constant conversation, and that closeness is built by filling every pause with sound. But the truth is far more profound. Silence has a language of its own, a depth that words often fail to capture. It is in the quiet that emotions settle, intentions clarify, and hearts truly resonate with one another. Real strength is the ability to recognize that not every moment requires explanation, that not every feeling requires expression, and that sometimes the most meaningful connection is felt rather than spoken. Silence allows presence to speak louder than words ever could. When two people share a quiet space without the need to constantly fill it, the energy between them becomes palpable. It communicates trust, patience, and understanding. It signals that you don't need to control the pace of the connection or manipulate feelings to feel secure. Being comfortable in silence shows that your bond isn't dependent on performance. It's rooted in authenticity. That's strength. The ability to let the moment exist as it is without forcing it, without reacting, without filling the gaps unnecessarily. Dialogue is important, but it can also overwhelm when overused. Words, though powerful, are subject to interpretation, miscommunication, and emotional noise. They can distract from what is truly happening between two people. Silence, on the other hand, allows emotions to settle and hearts to align without interference. It gives room for reflection and understanding. It gives space for longing, appreciation, and desire to grow naturally. When you recognize that connection often deepens not through constant explanation, but through shared presence, you create a foundation of trust that is unshakable. Strength in silence also requires patience and confidence. It means resisting the urge to chase, to over-explain, or to demand immediate responses. It means trusting that the bond is strong enough to withstand a pause, confident enough to let reflection take its course, and mature enough to know that connection doesn't always need words to thrive. This type of strength is magnetic because it signals stability and emotional intelligence. It communicates that the relationship is not fueled by insecurity, but by understanding, respect, and awareness. Silence also allows the other person to process their own emotions without pressure. It gives them the dignity to feel, think, and return on their own terms. When connection grows in these quiet moments, it is intentional rather than reactive. It is chosen rather than forced. And that intentionality is what makes the bond resilient, authentic, and deeply meaningful. Real strength lies in holding space for connection to breathe, to deepen, and to evolve. It lies in understanding that dialogue is only one form of communication, and that silence can carry more weight, more clarity, and more intimacy than words ever could. It is the quiet presence, the patient heart, and the steady energy that create a connection so profound it doesn't need constant validation to exist. Through silence, the connection becomes real, lasting, and undeniably powerful. In the end, the essence of a meaningful connection lies not in constant presence, endless reassurance, or relentless pursuit. It thrives in awareness, patience, and emotional intelligence. By stepping back, giving space, respecting rhythms, and embracing silence, we allow hearts to feel, reflect, and choose freely. True strength is measured not by control, but by understanding, self-mastery, and timing. When connection grows in this way, it becomes authentic, magnetic, and lasting, rooted in trust, respect, and the quiet power of intentional love.